Hi, Jerome. How are you?
Namaste. Hi, Marvin. Thanks so much for inviting me. And yeah, I'm doing great.
Nice to hear. Thanks to have the time for us. Jerome, for the audience who may not already know you, could you give us like a short intro? Who are you and what are you thinking about the topic of yoga?
Well, I'm Jerome Birdie, and I'm a yoga teacher for 12 or 13 years now. I'm here in Rishikesh now in India, where I actually did my first teacher training. So it's nice to come back and visit and see, kind of where that part of the journey started. And yeah, I'm based in Barcelona teaching trainings, not so many classes, teaching online, and just enjoying where the path of yoga takes me and where it has brought me up until now. It's still amazing when I say, like, my job as a yoga teacher. It's really an amazing job to have. And it's just beautiful because it's something that, also serves. It doesn't just serve the people that I'm teaching, it also serves me, not just with a livelihood, but it's also just such a beautiful way to have this exchange of energy, and that being your job, because it's just something that's really lovely. To be honest, it's my favorite thing that I do. So there's
Oh,
not many
wow.
people who can say like your job is your favorite thing that you do, and it's not
That's
something that
true.
you retire from either. I'll do it until I
Hmm.
die, probably, because that's the beauty of yoga, especially the yoga that I teach and practice. Is it's not one-sided. It's not just asana. Of course, I'm going to get old eventually and not be able to do all the poses. Probably still be able to explain them. But yoga is so vast. There's always the pranayama. There's always the philosophy. There's the meditation. And right now, my specific passion, or where I'm growing in more, my personal sadhana, would be with the mantras. It's funny when you start on this journey of yoga, where it takes you. Most people start with the asana, me too. No, I like the philosophy as well. So I maybe I entered through the philosophy, actually.
That's interesting.
Because I remember when I was in high school, I grew up in New York City. So I remember when I was in high school, I was always attracted to the Eastern philosophy, especially like the Buddha. And I remember just trying to find a way to study more. It just wasn't available in my schools. I was a philosophy major in college, and there was only one course that they offered on Eastern philosophy. I signed up right away. Not a lot of other people signed up, and the course got cut. So I ended up majoring in Western philosophy, which is nice too, but I much prefer the East, because that's
I
just
see. I see.
that's just my, I don't, if you believe in karma and reincarnation, I was probably there before. So it was more like when I discovered this path of yoga, it wasn't, I didn't feel like I was learning. I felt more like I was remembering, like, ah, yeah, that's probably why I developed pretty quickly on the path.
Well, this is already like a great start because there are so many points in there. I would love to dive in with you. Let's take one step back and let's start in the beginning of your journey. Do you remember, you said already the philosophy was your entry point. Do you remember when you took your first yoga class and how you get attracted to the topic?
The first yoga class was like 15 years after I started to be interested in the philosophy. So it's funny,
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, if you
Wow,
look
this is
at,
a.
yeah, if you look at who you are, not you, just
Mhm.
anybody personally, if you're really following your heart, you're really following your journey, you can see there was little seeds along the way. Maybe they weren't ready for the water, maybe they weren't ready to grow at that moment, but there was always seeds. So even when I was in, usually comes around adolescence, maybe even earlier, but for me, like in my conscious life, I remember in my adolescence is when I was attracted to these things like the philosophy from reading. My first love was writing, and I was reading, and along the way I got into Eastern literature, especially with like reading some of the beatniks like Jack Kerouac and them, and they introduced the
Yeah.
West. They introduced the West to this Eastern thought in a lot of ways. So I entered through there, and then I kept going. Who were they reading? When you find someone that you like, don't stop with them. Keep going.
And you
Like, who
go
were
to
they
the
reading?
root.
Who
Yeah.
inspired them? And keep going, going, going. So that was it. But like I said, I didn't have any guidance. I even started to play the drum a little bit. This is part of my mantra right now. Like, I play the drum. So it was there, but it didn't develop because no one, I didn't have a guide. I didn't have a guide, and I guess I needed that. Not everyone does, but I did, and it just kind of went away. So that was when I was, 15, 16. Long story, but I ended up becoming a journalist because, like I said, writing was my first love. But I couldn't make any money with creative writing, so I ended up in journalism. And and I was going along that. It was fun. It was nice. I like to write. But when I started to have this spiritual awakening, so when I took my first yoga class was actually when I was 32. I went down to Brazil to this ayahuasca retreat, and they
Yeah,
had yoga in the morning. They had yoga. Before that, I didn't really even know what the word was. I was just, this is a funny word, and if you Google yoga, probably Bikram came up at that time. So I was like, oh, that doesn't look like something I want to do.
yeah,
But then in Brazil, when we went there, this shaman was really connected to the West as well. So in the morning, they had pranayama and asana. And right there, I got connected to that specifically. And of course, you're drinking the medicine, so whatever you're doing that's awakening spiritually is going to be magnified. So that's
for
kind of
sure.
what happened. And whatever I was doing before that trip in May of 2010 didn't continue, including eating meat, including practicing martial arts, including drinking a lot, including like
Wow. So
chasing
it was
women.
like a pivot point in your
It was a
journey,
pivot
or
point, just because that's when I was
yeah,
ready. That's when finally the water took to seed and the blossom came. Even flowers, you can even look at flowers. Nobody knows. You can even ask a scientist. Nobody knows the moment when it's going to bloom. The flower, maybe the flower doesn't even know, but it blooms. So when that happens, it just happens. It's a happening. The great things are not planned at all. They're just happening. So at that moment is when the water hit the seed and the flower started to grow. So when I went back to the States, when I was working as a journalist in South Florida, when I went back to the States, things started to shift. I was a crime reporter. So I was like, what am I doing here? I'm putting more fear and hatred in the world. This is not what the world is. And I'm serving that part of the world that I don't want to serve. So the next year after the trip to Brazil, the next year I did a Vipassana meditation, the 10-day silent meditation. And that was a parallel experience for me with the ayahuasca. Of course, there's no medicine, so it's just coming from
but
you.
yeah,
So that was
but a lot
and
of
then after
people
that,
say this.
that was like, so that was in May of 2010. Then I think maybe about a year later, I did that. So then by November of 2011, I was quitting my job as a journalist and on my way to Rishikesh. Right.
Wow, already with the intention to go to yoga teacher training, or just with the calling of like, I want to dive deep into the topic of yoga?
Well, like I said, when I got back from Brazil, I kept practicing yoga and I was like
Hmm.
developing pretty quickly. I'm like, oh, I'm pretty good at this. I'll do a teacher training just because that's something to do. Not that I wanted to teach, but that
Yeah,
seed was there also
I think a lot
because
of people know this point.
yeah, that seed was there also because, like, even during the teacher training, we were here in a big hall, and the
Hmm.
classes were public. Ashtanga classes were public also. So towards the end, he would call the students like, "Who wants to teach this line?" And everyone was terrified, but I was like excited to do it. So I feel like, yeah, it was just part of my karma to be on this
Hmm.
path, and it sustained me up to now. I can't imagine what I would do if it didn't continue. I'd probably go to a monastery somewhere, and that's
Wow.
that.
But that's so interesting because I think what sticks out for me from your journey is that you already find a kind of yogic practice while you were like not already practicing the asana, right? You already moved into the right direction until everything like came together for you. When was the point when you realized, okay, I like this, so I'm excited about the opportunity to teach? I may think about I want to do this like even when I get back to now you're in Europe or when you get back into the Western world.
Yeah, so I did the teacher training and I stayed in India a little bit longer. And then when I went back to the States, there was nothing else that I could think of doing. So I started to teach. Of course, in the beginning, there's no money. I'm teaching a few classes for very low money. Had a second job. I was working on a food truck in New York City, a vegan food truck, which is not an easy job, and you're out
No.
there in the elements and the super hot and the super cold and all this. And little by little, I just picking away. I had some savings. It's nice if you're going to make this journey to have some savings somehow. Either you had a real job before
Hmm.
or someone's there to support you a little bit. So, I did have some savings to keep me going for a little while. And of course, I'm making a little money on the food truck and the yoga teaching. And yeah, I just kept going. I found my teacher. That's another thing too, especially here in India, you know. you can't develop, the traditional ways you cannot develop without a guru, without a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in that vein too. Of course, the guru doesn't have to be someone physical. It can be, if you're strong enough and if you're really perceptive, it can be your inner voice. Because that's where the guru leads you anyway, to your inner voice. So some people have that talent. There are people who have reached their enlightenment without ever having a teacher or a guru. Possible, but for me, I needed a teacher. When I went back to New York after a long journey, trying all these different styles and teachings, and I was finding nothing. I finally found my teacher there in New York City. So you have to like go across the world to find your teacher right there in your hometown. But of course, it's like if I had seen him before, I wouldn't have recognized him. So sometimes, when the teach students ready, the teacher appears, as the Buddha says. That's what it was. So I was ready, and I finally met my teacher, and I stayed with him, with Dharma Mitra, for 7 years there in New York, just obsessed, like really with the teachings. And that also propelled me. So I feel like if you find a teacher, or if you find a style at least, stay with that style and go deep. Even in Vipassana, for people who did Vipassana, he'll tell you that everything's beautiful, everything will lead you to the truth, but find which one and really stay on that journey. If you're jumping from style to style, it's going to be really difficult to get profound
I think
in the
this is
practice.
like, yeah, I think this is a super valuable advice. I think even in the beginning. So a lot of people listening to the podcast are like beginner yoga teachers, are people like in the field of yoga, like you described yourself before, like are super interested, they are going deeper into the topic. How would you define your own style, and how did your style develop, or how did you found what really like inspired you to practice?
In my first teacher training here, I didn't really know anything, just taking the classes that I was taking before my first teacher training. That's when I really had a deeper understanding. And in the morning they had Ashtanga Vinyasa, and in the afternoon they
Mm-hmm.
had Hatha. I didn't like the Ashtanga at all. I just don't like Vinyasa. I knew that wasn't for me. So I didn't
Okay.
like it. It's a good practice in the beginning. It's a good practice, especially if you need discipline. But I'm more of a playful person and more free person in the practice. There is a structure, and I'll explain. So I was more attracted to the Hatha. But the Hatha, even though I liked all the different aspects of the hatha, the physical practice is a little bit boring, I want to say. I don't want to say boring, but just not challenging.
Yeah.
Not challenging. So I knew I liked the hatha. I knew I didn't like the vinyasa so much. Like I like to stay longer in the poses, but I was
Mm-hmm.
also attracted to the advanced poses. So in the physical practice of yoga. So like I said, that journey took me on until I discovered my teacher, Dharma. And the beauty of this style, Dharma Yoga, is that there is freedom there, but also it has all the aspects of yoga. So you can find where you want to develop. Of course, Dharma the man is known for having advanced asana in his classes. It's hatha. Or sometimes we call it hatha raja, which is not a category that exists. Just to say that we're expressing through all the different aspects of yoga. We're not just doing the asana. We're doing mantra. We're doing pranayama, yoga nidra, so we're expanding, we're studying the yamas niyamas philosophy. So this is really the root of my style. Now the beauty of this style also in the asana is you're free. There is a sequence, there is a structure, not a sequence, there is a structure, but within that you can be free. Like there's forward folds here. That can be Paschimottanasana, a forward fold if you're doing a simple class, or it can be legs behind the head. It can really have that
Adjust.
big range. So it's playful. The beauty of the practice, I even consider it a more of a mature practice when you're being playful. No offense to people, doing a more structured style where you have to stay with this pose only, and then only when the teacher tells you can move on. But the beauty of this is like there are some notes, but you can learn the notes. Like this is a quote of Mozart: you can learn the notes and then you can forget them. So when you have a good understanding of the practice, until you have a good understanding of the practice, or at least the asana that you want to teach and why you're teaching in this way, then you're going to teach a sequence. You have to teach a sequence, otherwise it's going to be unstructured and not helpful to anyone really. So once you understand that, then you can play. So once you understand the structure, then you can play within the structure. It's like, I like to think of it like jazz. Like jazz, when they're doing their improvisation, there's a
Yeah.
structure there. People don't realize that, but there's a
It's a
structure there.
baseline,
John
which is, yeah.
there's a baseline that you always come back to. So you can fly, but then you come back. You're always coming back to that. And even some of those flying where it seems like they're totally random, those are prepared too. Some of them are prepared, but there's freedom within that structure. So that's where
Mm-hmm.
I feel the most myself. That's just who I am. So that's another thing. Like whoever you are as a yoga teacher, you have to find the style and the teacher, if you're going to find a teacher, that fits you. And remember, the teacher is not someone that's better than you. They're you, but more developed. So when you surrender,
Yeah, yeah.
so also the
That's a
big
good.
thing, the most important thing in yoga, if you find a teacher or style, you have to like let go and surrender to that person or that style. But we have a hard problem with that in the West. Like I don't, surrender and obedience are words that we don't like to use because we're a rebellious kind of society. But remember, you're not surrendering to that person or that style. You're surrendering to yourself. You're giving that person or that style permission to be your boss for the 90 minutes
Yeah,
or for whatever it is. So
I
you're
love this
actually
part.
becoming that, you're becoming that. You are that already. You're just looking for the evidence along the way.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. I think I have to think about this afterwards as well. Because it's absolutely true, and this reflects absolutely in me. I had like big trouble in the beginning before I could get first time and second time to yoga. And I think it took me like at least 3 trips to India before I found somebody I could really call a guru. And then you make this realization that you're like, okay, it's not about this upper or lower. Somebody is really better than you. You can't compare yourself to somebody you really want to learn from, right? That's super interesting. You
And
said you
that's
teach
important to
at,
remember as you
yeah,
advance that you're not better than your students either. They're
yeah,
some of,
same.
like just we're all getting to the same place, different timelines. So really, like one of the lines I like to say is, we're here to help each other. And if you're in that class with the collective energy, that's the most beautiful thing there is, because people are
Mm-hmm.
feeding off each other. People do more advanced things that they never thought they could do. They can sit for an hour in meditation because they're absorbing that energy. Everyone's sharing. We're connected. You can't see it here, but there's this energetic field connecting us all. Sorry, this phone is dying. There's this energetic
All
field
good, no
connecting us
worries.
all,
Yeah,
so it's nice to you realize that when you're in the collective.
wow. I think this is as well like a good kind of inspiration or a good kind of glimpse why you love teaching yoga. I think this shows like a lot in what you're saying. If you, because you said you teach as well a lot of trainings at the moment or in general, if you had like one or two advice you would give like beginner yoga teachers, would it be this, or do you have something additional you would add on,
Yeah,
which
I
is
would say
maybe
like
important at the beginning?
you can do it. If you want to do it, you can do it. Don't think you can't do it. Don't think you have to be a master. You don't have to be a master at these things. You just have to be a little better than your students. And the students are going to be attracted to the type of teacher you are. Don't feel like, I have to, there are people around, who are super advanced. You're not going to teach them now, if you're not there yet, but the world is thirsty for yoga now. So there's so many different aspects, and you can do it. You have a purpose and you can serve. This is the beauty of the yoga practices. We're serving not just ourselves, but the other too. So this is interchange. So I would say, like, you can do it, believe you can do it, practice from your heart, stay with you there?
Yeah.
Stay with what's honest to you, stay with
Mm-hmm.
what's honest to you, and you're going to succeed. You're going to succeed. You're here. You there?
That's,
Sorry.
yeah, that's
You're
great.
bound to succeed if you stay on that path, if you follow your heart. The thing with the heart
Mm-hmm.
is it's not so loud, so people get confused very easily. If you're doing your meditation in the morning and you pay
Mm-hmm.
attention, the heart is the one that whispers, but if you don't catch it right away, the mind is the one that shouts. That's the one that's telling you, you can't do that. So don't listen to that one. You have to be really receptive and really subtle. The heart is very subtle when it starts to speak. So the idea is to really listen to that, hone into that, and believe it. This is your intuition. This is the voice of God within you. So follow that thing, because you can and you will do it if you stick with it. You're not going to make money in the beginning. Like I said, it's a job that's really difficult in the beginning. You're going to find your students. Just stay with it. It's even better if you don't have to depend on this in the beginning, just business wise
Yeah.
speaking.
I
And if
think
you have
this
a
is a
family
good
that
advice
supports you,
as well.
very
Yeah.
important. Have some money saved if you want to jump into this before you quit your job. But you can do it. It's the best job in the world, because the best job in the world you never want to retire from. You don't retire from
Yeah.
this job. You know, my uncle, some people ask me, do you have a 401k? And I was, no, I'm not going to retire. I'm going to
Yeah.
work till I die. I'm hopefully, you know, if I die teaching a class, that's even better. You go to the
I
right
think
place.
for sure. And I think even, there was this study about the people who get the oldest on the world. And it shows like a lot of different factors. And one of these factors was always that they were needed in a kind of community. They were until, I don't know, 90, 100 years old. They were always working, they were always doing stuff and not getting too settled. And I think even like you said before, this is maybe a thing from the Western society, that we think into like kind of schematas, that we think into, oh yeah, now is the time to work on this, and then will have a break afterwards. But it's an illusion as well. And how you describe it, I think a lot of people can feel this fire, can feel this kind of energy, which gives to you for sure. So I think it's worth definitely to go deeper into that. I like this advice.
Yeah, movement is always important, whatever you're going to do, whether it's your own personal practice or your lifestyle. Like it's always important. I remember this, I read this parable once: movement is a friend of life, stagnation is a friend of death. So that's one of my fears is stagnation. I'm always continuing. You know, maybe now
Mm-hmm.
I'm satisfied with my asana practice. So to be honest, I'm not really growing so much there. Only when I teach it. When I teach it is when I experience it again anew. But so there, if I'm already considering myself a teacher in the asana, I'm always looking for the student mind. So I'm doing other things. You can do things outside of yoga. My yoga practice now, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
is chanting mantra, pranayama, meditation. That's my yoga practice. My exercise is more like exercise now. Sometimes I'll do capoeira or weight training, things that I feel humbled in again. So
Mm-hmm.
the yoga practice, I'm still happy, you know, I still practice asana, but I don't practice the way I used to. But I keep continuing on. I keep this flow of it's wonderful to watch how your practice, whatever it is, physical or otherwise, evolves throughout time. You know, I've been doing it a long time, so it just has evolved. And whatever else I do influences the asana practice that I teach.
That's super interesting. I think there's some truth in that. And it's funny because the more I talk to people and the more I talk to people who are already like long time into yoga and like practicing or teaching for like even like centuries, it feels like the people get more and more like, you know, drawn into the other aspects of yoga. And how you described it before, I think even this is where the juice lies and where it's more sustainable. Like when you get older and you want still to teach. I was seeing the guru of a friend of mine. He is like, I think he's nearby 90. And she was always telling me he don't has to show any asana. He doesn't has to do anything. He just sits and he talks and he chants his mantras and he is explaining to the people so precisely, and people love to practice with him. People really enjoy this. And I think this is where we evolve towards, right? To do something we really love and we can do like inspire people until we are super old. That's super nice.
And that says something for the students too, to want to be around that, because some people who don't
Mm-hmm.
understand that are just going to want to be around the beautiful teacher doing the beautiful poses. But if you're receptive, you can feel that wisdom in that person, even though they can't do the physical thing anymore. They can still, if you're receptive enough, you can even get it without even talking to them. You can really absorb it, just the subtleties. You can just absorb that energy. There's a
Mm-hmm.
nice phrase like, if your eyes are open, the people whose eyes aren't open, they'll never see the halo on the saint. They're just going to see some old weird person, you know? But the people
Yeah.
whose eyes are open, they can see that, they recognize that because they have it too. It's just a little bit undeveloped. So they have it too. And you can just absorb it. For me, like, you know, obviously my teacher is 76 now. Can't do all the poses
Yeah.
anymore, but I still learn being around them, just learn being around them because I'm absorbing that knowledge that's there. It's there. So these people have been doing it their lifetime. It's just you step into the room and you can feel it if you're connected to that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So if any person is now in their journeys and they are thinking, okay, how to find their teacher, how would they choose their teacher? You already said the teacher is appearing when you are ready as a student, but Do you think there are qualities in like teachers you were looking out for or you would recommend nowadays?
You can't, don't look. Just keep practicing, you know, keep practicing. If there's someone you don't like, they're not connecting to you on a deeper level besides just the asana, unless that's what you're looking for, then go somewhere else, you know, until you find your style or your teacher. You're of course free to go anywhere you want to go. So try all the different styles until you find it. Maybe you're going to be like me, like almost I'm not gonna even have a teacher. I'm just gonna do self practice the rest of my life, and that's when they
Hmm.
come. You know, like you don't know when the flower is gonna open, so just don't give up. Keep going. If it's for you, it's gonna open, and it will open. So there's no advice I can do. Just don't look. You know, this be effortless in that. Enjoy the journey. Go to the different teachers until you find the one that connects to you. You're gonna know. It's just like falling in love. You just know.
I think that's the best advice at all. Keep practicing. That's the main thing, and just like enjoy the journey along the way.
It's all going to come from self practice. Whatever you do, when you after you discover the teacher, your best gifts
Hmm.
are going to come in your self practice. The teacher's going to give you some stuff, and then you got to self practice. You got to do the self practice. That's where everything comes. That's where all the magic happens.
Hmm.
And then you go back to the teacher as like, it's almost like an offering back to the teacher. When you're in the class, you can do these fancy poses, or you can sit in meditation, or you can chant the mantras beautifully as a gift back to the teacher in a way, if you have that kind of respect for him or her.
Comes all back to the point you mentioned earlier that we are all connected, right? In the end,
Yeah.
it's just an energy exchange from your future to your past and back. That's
Yeah, that's a
amazing.
nice way. Yeah. That's nice. Yeah.
So if people now are like on the yoga path and or they let's say maybe just start out, would you recommend them to practice even yoga in different kind of places? I mean, you went to India multiple times now. What do you think? Are there more traditional places to learn yoga, or do you think you find teachers
No.
and studios and like community wherever you go?
Wherever you go. I came here like I said, I came here in 2012 and I hadn't been back until last year to India. So you don't need to come to India. Absolutely not. And to be
Mm-hmm.
honest, I don't really even love, unless you like Ashtanga, I'm not a big fan of the asana here anyway. So, but you don't have to come to India anymore. You would, I was speaking to a musician once, an African musician, and I said, "Do you go to Africa to, this is in New York, do you go to Africa to study the music?" He's like, "No, you don't have to go to Africa anymore. You know, the masters are everywhere. You don't go to Africa for the why, or you don't go to India for the why. I'm sorry, you don't go for the how. You maybe go for the why. But for the
Mm-hmm.
how to do it, the
Yeah,
teachers are everywhere. For the why, if you want to
absolutely.
come here and sit by the Ganges and feel the vibration, sure, do that if you can, but you don't have to. So if you don't have the money or the ability to come to India, you're not going to miss out on anything. My teacher, Dharma, has never even been to India. So you don't have to come to India at all. You don't have to leave your own neighborhood. You know, maybe if you're in a place with no yoga at all, but we have online now. So you can go online and find your teacher that way also.
That's a great point. If we see like how all of this, let's say, yoga movement in the last years evolve and it gets bigger and bigger, and you said there's so much demand for yoga nowadays as well. What do you think are the biggest changes in yoga you see right now from like now 12 years backwards when you started out with like teaching yoga? I mean, there has to be like a big evolution into it, right? And then at the same time, it's like still something which is so traditional and has so deep roots.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe now, I mean, it's hard for me to say because obviously you see your own reflection. So maybe I would like to tell you that more people are interested in kind of the other aspects of yoga, like mantra and yoga nidra and things that will really help to serve you on a more subtle level. But I think in general, people are still more attracted to the asana. I think in general, people don't really understand yoga
What's
philosophy. I
behind?
think in general,
Yeah,
people are still eating meat, which is just not hand in hand with yoga. I don't want to judge anybody. I think like it's okay to be who you are, but it's not okay to eat animals. It's just not okay. You know, it's not part of the yoga philosophy. It's not part of ahimsa. It's not something you can force upon yourself. If you feel like you're not ready to do it, then don't do it. Keep practicing. It'll drop off, but it's just
yeah.
I don't think
No,
it's part of the thing. I just don't think it's part of the thing.
I totally get this. I see it as well. Like, I think what a lot of teachers I talk to say as well is like asana is for a lot of people a kind of, anchor where they start seeing what yoga can do for their lives and they start out with the asana practice. But I totally get that. I think a lot of people don't go deeper. Nowadays, yoga looks, for me, in a lot of cases, like in fitness studios or anything, like more like a kind of workout. And it fails in like providing the people with like basic things which are so important. For example, in the Ashtanga system, and if it's Ahimsa, if it's the yamas or the niyamas, this should be like a kind of backline. And so this is interesting to see, what is yoga becoming, and at the same time, everything has to evolve, everything has to, innovate itself, but at the same time, we have to keep like a kind of core of this truth, right? So it's like a gap, and I think yoga teachers in general has to handle this gap for themselves and for their students.
For themselves, more importantly, like you cannot teach
Mm-hmm.
what you're not practicing. So you have to like become a
Absolutely.
modern
Yeah.
day yogi before you can really express that. So it's okay. There's plenty of asana teachers. Most of them are asana teachers. That's okay. But just
Mm-hmm.
real, the general public has to understand that yoga is a lifestyle. It's not a 90-minute thing. It's not something where, there's plenty of classes they don't even do an om. Like for me, this is
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm a little more traditional in that way, that I like these things that are like the staple of yoga and that bring you into a state of devotion. For me, yoga is also a state of devotion. This is why I like the bhakti yoga now. But when you put yourself in a state of devotion, even with the poses, they too can become like a prayer. They too will not frustrate you as much when you can't do them because you cannot do them at first. So if you realize it as a prayer, as a process, it's okay every time you fall or do something that try something and you just don't succeed. That's okay too. You enjoy the process. You're going to try to chant new mantras. They're not going to sound right. That's okay. You enjoy the process. You're going to try to stop eating animals. It's not going to be easy at first. That's okay. You enjoy the process. This is all. You're going to sit in meditation where you're going to be thinking about 1,000 other things. That's okay. Keep coming back to the practice. It's going to take care of everything. The self practice is the main thing, So I think like even the yoga teachers, everyone, they need to do self practice beyond the asana. The asana is beautiful. You have to do that too. I'm not saying
Mm-hmm.
like give up. I'm not trying to say bad things about the asana either. It's all beautiful. Just realize it's part of the system. That's why I also love my lineage, because it's very difficult to find the one-stop shopping. Maybe you're going to find
Mm-hmm.
someone that understands the yamas, niyamas, they understand the pranayama and the mantras, but they have a big belly and they can't do any poses. Or you're going to
Mm-hmm.
find someone that does all the poses, but they don't know what Vedanta is, So it's hard to find all of that. And that for me, that is what the yoga is, when you have it all in one. And maybe today I'm feeling more fire, I want to do more asana. Maybe the next day I want to just chant Sitaram, Sitaram. That's all yoga, that's all part of the thing. And that's the beauty of it, because you'll always have something to do on your spiritual journey. If you're injured and you can't do the poses, you can still find so many other things to do, or just sit and journal, or meditate. That's yoga too. Yoga is whatever connects you to the higher thing, to the spirit, to your own soul.
Wow. Yeah, I really, really like this point. I think as well, like, I use the example of like a kind of toolbox. There are so many different things in there, and you can use whatever suits you at the moment, which doesn't mean you will never touch the other kind of tools anymore, but it just is maybe the right thing for the right situation at this time. And
Yeah.
the beauty is to understand that it's like a full box of that.
One of my favorite times I was teaching a workshop in Japan, and when I teach these workshops, I'm doing the physical and the more subtle. So it was really a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful experience there, because I don't know if you've been to Japan or anyone's been to Japan there, like the students are really like this, are really obedient. So it's really beautiful. There you
Yeah.
feel like a teacher. It's nice. But it was really one of the beautiful experiences for me when I saw the handstand people, who really, some people, they really like the handstand, staying for the pranayama and the mantra, and the mantra people trying to do the handstand. So it's like really nice to see
Wow.
that interchange of mingling. And there is when you see, even if you do a
Mm-hmm.
teacher training or if you're in a yoga class, you're going to see everybody has their strong point, everybody has their weak point. So together we're perfect, but individual, we all have our ups and downs, all have our flaws. Maybe you're going to see someone doing the amazing splits, but they can't do the back bend, or someone doing the back bend, they can't do the handstand, or someone doing the hand, or someone that does it all, but they're still an asshole.
Mm.
They still have to do yamas niyamas. So it's like together we're perfect, and there's always something you can teach and something you can learn.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I love this point. Man, Jerome, thank you so much for all these insights. I think there was a lot in this episode to inspire people. If people will now like to know more about you, about the workshops, about the work you do in general, about your practice, what is the best way to get in contact with you?
Well, they can go to the website Om Jerome, OM Jerome, JEROME.com, or it's the same thing on Instagram, Om Jerome. Stay in touch. And I have
I
some
will
free,
link
if you go to
everything.
the website, there's a download you can have of a free online mantra workshop. So you can get started with mantras that way as well.
That's amazing. Man, thank you so much. Wish you the best and hope to talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Marvin. Big pleasure. Hari Om. Thank you. Thanks, brother. Good. Thanks. Nothing to say. Yeah, I appreciate it, and I love that what you're doing. I mean, like I said, I was a journalist too, so I really appreciate. It's nice to be on the other end as well, and I hope everything's okay. My phone was really freaking out here. The Wi-Fi is just horrible here, so I hope everything's okay with the recording. If not, let me know. Sure, sure, sure. And yeah, feel free to and feel free to collaborate with me if you want on the posts. Yeah, I'm structured too. I'm a New York City Capricorn, so I'm structured too. But India, that does not work. And my girlfriend just keeps telling me, like, forget about planning, stop trying to plan. I'm like, I'm just trying to figure out if we're gonna buy the bus tickets for tomorrow. But it's like you can't plan anything. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's a good quality. But here, you learn surrender here a little bit. Where are you? Where are you based? Where? Ah, beautiful. Yeah, man. If you want to go drink some ayahuasca in Brazil, I'll tell you where to go. And the right timing, and the right time. You might not need to. For me, like when I first did it, it was a powerful awakening. So now I'm already awake. I don't need it for that, but it's nice to do as a little check-in. Like, am I really doing so great? It will tell you. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oops, I was wrong. Yeah, but like I don't know if you saw this documentary on Ram Dass. Like, Ram Dass, amazing dude. So even when he was old and he was dying from the stroke, he said like there was no inclination towards the spiritual when he was there on his deathbed. It's like, okay, I have to go back to work. Like, so even though he's super famous spiritual leader, at that moment that counts, he fell short. So he went back, and then he became really even more powerful after the stroke. Yeah. Ah, yeah. Thanks for doing that. Thank you. See you next time. Peace, brother.